Okay, cool. So we are online. And ladies and gentlemen, for tonight's session, we have somebody very special in the house. I've been teasing this since last week. This is our 12th session of Junkyard Theory, and we are ending this year with a massive bang. So tonight's guest is somebody who's worked on massive film and television productions ranging from shows like Game of Thrones to The Crown to Victor Frankenstein, Overlord, and very specifically the mythical Snyder Cut, which is not very mythical anymore. It's a real thing which is happening. So we have the man behind the camera, behind the cinematography, Mr. Fabian Wagner himself. Fabian, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Sri Lanka. It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Man, this is such an honor, and it's great to have you. Thank you for coming. And when I was in San Diego last year at Comic Con, I saw this banner being flown about the convention center saying "Release the Snyder Cut." I mean, it's amazing how much this movement gained traction and snowballed into something that actually pushed the release of the original vision, Zack's original vision. So, what did you feel when that happened, man?
Well, it was a whole mixed bag of emotions. It was obviously, first and foremost, I'm super happy for Zack to actually get the opportunity to finish and show the film that he always wanted to show it. It's something that's never happened before, I think, in film history. So it's pretty amazing that a movement that was mainly fronted by the fans, that says a lot about the fan base. That says a lot about the commitment of the fans. It says a lot about their love for Zack Snyder, and for also, on the other hand, that they weren't happy with what we saw in the 2017 theatrical version. So I think it's just it's something that's never happened before. So I'm super happy for that. Also for myself, obviously, for my work to be seen the way that we shot it. But then on the other hand, there's also a very bitter feeling, because obviously this whole thing started with Zack initially having to leave the movie because unfortunately his daughter committed suicide, and that was a very tragic, horrible thing, and still is, and so that's always also the thought, So, but you've got to go and keep going, I think, and that's obviously what Zack did, and now he's having the chance, which I know he's very grateful for to everyone, and we all are, to see the film that he always wanted to show it.
Definitely, and like you said, it's history. It's historical, I guess, because it's the first time something, the effort from the fans has resulted in something like this. But speaking of history, I would like to dive into yours. How did you get into filmmaking? Could you kind of walk us through the whole, your origin story, basically?
Well, it's not as interesting as that one. I've always loved movies. I've always loved watching films and watching TV, and I was just always a big. That was always the thing that I was drawn to the most. So, as soon as I was old enough and kind of understood what the different elements were, I started to film stuff myself with my best friend who wanted to become a director, and we were just filming loads of stuff. We must have been about 14 maybe when we started filming stuff, and I got into photography and just generally just visuals and things like that. And then I just kept going. I was working, I was in school obviously still, but shooting with my best mate all the time, lots of various things, and then started to work on short films for the Munich Film School, and did lots of different things. Then I went to film school myself after having been rejected a couple of times. Eventually got into the film school and did that there. And, when I came out, I didn't really focus on cinematography properly. And then I
Was
moved
it
to
in
the UK.
was it in the
And that was
UK
it.
or was it in Germany?
Well, this was all in the. I started all of this in Germany because I'm from Munich originally, and so I went. Then I went to Denmark to the film school, did a diploma, came back to Germany after that, and I was working for a year before I decided that I wanted to actually work on more international productions. And I've always enjoyed the English language. I didn't want to move too far away from home, so America was out of the question. So I went to England, and 20 years later, I'm still here. So, so yeah, and then I did my master's here at the film school in England, and after a couple of years, finished that, and then I was starting to do various jobs. And I did everything from shooting cheap, crappy corporate commercials to music videos to short films to then suddenly picking up some second unit for TV dramas. Eventually getting my first DOP gig as the main DP for a BBC Three drama, and since then, really, then I really got into TV, and I was doing TV for 4 or 5 years, working on all sorts of different shows. Thankfully, always sort of getting more challenging and bigger,
Sure.
which accumulated in me doing Sherlock season 2, which was thankfully a massive success everywhere, and from that, then I went into Game of Thrones and Frankenstein, and so there's a lot of sort of people I have to be very thankful and grateful to taking me along the way.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. And so you've oscillated between working in independent movies, television, and then studio movies as well. How has it been like, the difference when it comes to working in television versus working in film, what cinematography wise?
Well, I mean, I think when I started 20 years ago, or maybe it's now, let's say 15 years ago, when I did my first TV drama as a DP, I think it was slightly different then, but it's all changed now. I mean, TV has become obviously much bigger. The shows have become much bigger. The scale has become much bigger. The budgets have become much bigger. The ambitions have become bigger. So I don't think there is much in between these days between doing TV and film. I mean, obviously there are small TV shows and there are big ones, and same with small films or big films. But I mean, overall, I think there isn't that much in there anymore. You watch more TV these days that's been shot in widescreen 2:3:5 or 2:1. So aspect ratio wise, it becomes a lot more cinematic, trying to be more like cinema. So I think all these things sort of came together very quickly afterwards. And if I look back on shooting some of the episodes of Game of Thrones, I mean, they are as big from any point of view, whether it's financially or scale-wise, as any big film. So it's hard to sort of keep the
Differentiate the
two apart.
two. Yeah. Speaking of, the boundaries becoming blurred, especially now with streaming, television has kind of like become the new cinema. Where do you see all these, the whole filmmaking landscape going in the future? I mean, I know it's very unprecedented and it's hard to predict, but in your opinion, where do you see that going in the next few years?
Well, I think it can only go one way. I mean, I've always had a sort of bleak outlook on the future of cinema, and how this whole thing, is turning. And I think that's now been sort of sped up almost through COVID and through this whole crisis. Obviously, I mean, look, I love cinemas. I love going to the cinema. And I don't think cinema will ever die as such, but I think it just becomes more of a niche, maybe. Hopefully not, but hopefully people will go back to the cinemas. But nowadays, people have, their big TVs at home. They have got their Dolby surround systems at home, and a lot of people choose to just stay at home on their sofa and watch their movies there. And then you've got, obviously big big distributors who are now releasing their movies on streaming channels at the same time as the cinema. So it's a very challenging time. I hope that cinemas will survive. I'm sure they will, but it probably will be a slightly different landscape than the one that we're used to when, I was a kid and I was going to the cinema once or twice a week, and it was always an event to go to the cinema. It was always the one thing that I was looking forward to all the time. So it's just different, but it's something that I don't think anyone can stop as such.
That makes sense, yeah. And I mean, you worked, taking your filmography into account, you bounce back and forth between multiple genres. Could you just talk to me a little bit about how your cinematography style has evolved from shifting from genre to genre? You've obviously done horror, you've done fantasy, and you've done action, thriller, basically the whole spectrum. So how has your cinematography evolved throughout the ages when it comes to genre specifically in question?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's lots more genres that I'd love to do. I haven't done, I'd love to do Western, I'd love to do sci-fi, I'd love to do, there's lots more genres I'd love to do. But in general, I guess, one of the great and cool things about this job is that it's always different and it's never the same. And you can do like a horror this month and then a drama the next month and then something else the month after. So, and that's what I love about it, because it always keeps you on your toes and you always keep learning. Every time you do something new, you keep learning. You make mistakes and you keep learning. You make mistakes and you keep learning. And that's something that I've always enjoyed very much. The process, even though making mistakes is difficult and hard, but it's also something I've enjoyed because it makes you learn. So yeah, I love, and that's one of the reasons why I love this job, is that you can always do different things in different eras, different genres, different looks. It keeps it very versatile.
100%, yeah. And what was it like? I mean, Justice League was the very first time that you worked with Zack Snyder. Walk us through the process. Like, how did this materialize? How did it happen?
I have no idea. I'd love to know exactly how it happened. I never expected to get the phone call, and once I had the phone call, which I remember I was sitting on my chair at home, and I literally fell off my chair when my agent said, "Zack Snyder wants to meet you." I thought it was a joke. And then I went to see Zack, and we had a very nice conversation for a couple of hours. And I said to him, "Thank you very much, and good luck shooting your movie," because I just didn't expect that I would get the job. I was just grateful that I had the chance to meet him and everything. But I literally did not expect to get a job. And 2 weeks later, they called me up and said, "Zack would like you to do it." And I'll never forget that moment, because it was just, I couldn't believe it. I was so excited and so taken aback at the same time. And I think even when we started prepping and I was driving to work every day and I saw Zack every day and we were prepping for the film, I still was driving to work in the morning thinking this is not real. So it was a pretty surreal experience, but it was great. And it's, again, one of the great things about this job is that unexpected things can happen every day.
Yeah. You can say that again, because getting to work with someone like Zack Snyder, I'm sure, like you were familiar with his work from before, but actually working with the guy himself, how was his like? What was his filmmaking process like? How meticulous was he when it came to prep? Because a massive project like a film in the DC extended universe, it's no small undertaking. So what was that like?
Well, it's just, I've said this on numerous occasions, and I can only repeat it. First of all, Zack is like the nicest guy. He's just a nice guy. Like, there's nothing you can say bad about him. He's just incredibly kind, and he's funny. He's super creative. Like, he's constantly thinking. When it comes to this, he's a massive DC fan. He knows everything about the DC universe. He knows everything about these characters. So he's super meticulous. He's super detailed. I mean, even when I saw him for the initial chat, for the interview, he had already storyboarded, I think, probably half the movie and showed me some of it, So
By
he
himself.
storyboards everything. And, so yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from him professionally, but also on a human level,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So you mentioned storyboards. Were these like drawn by Zack himself, or?
Yeah, Zack is a great artist on many levels, and he's a very good. He can draw very well. He's always sketching. He's always doodling away on set. Even he would sit there
Uh-huh.
during when he has 2 minutes, and he just takes his pad and he just draws something, all the time. It's amazing. It's amazing the way he draws, and the storyboards are. I mean, just the storyboards are pieces of art because they're so detailed and meticulous, and they're very, very similar to what you shoot.
That's amazing. So about I have another question about storyboarding. So how much do the storyboards influence your cinematography? Not specifically on Justice League, but in general.
I always think storyboards are a good guideline, but I always want to be free enough to throw the storyboards away on the day if I think that actually there's a better way of doing it. But storyboards are very helpful on many levels. They're very helpful. I mean, first of all, they're helpful to the director and you because you just you talk about things for so long. If you have the storyboard, you don't forget what you actually talked about because you talk about so many different ways of shooting something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very helpful for communicating something to other departments, to other people. So if you have a storyboard, or especially like a previs, which is something that we do on very big sequences, you can actually, because you have so many departments involved, like for example, Game of Thrones, it's not only I've got the camera department, but then I have the lighting, then I have the art department, and there's the special effects, the visual effects. And so with a previs or a storyboard, I can actually go through all the things that we want to do, and I can physically show people, right, this is where this setup we need like lots of smoke from over here, and we need fire here, and we need it's going to be a blue screen over there, and so you actually have something physical to explain to people what's going to happen, and that makes it much easier, and you avoid a lot more problems. So storyboards are very helpful on a artistic level, but also very much so for me on a technical level.
And how early on in the pre-production process do you get involved?
It depends on the job, and it depends on the budget. It depends on how much prep you get. Sometimes you're there a lot. Generally, you always get involved at the same time, which will be obviously the directors first, then the production designer will come on board. Sometimes their team will start designing some stuff. Production is up and running, and then the DP will come on board. And then it just varies from job to job. I've done jobs where I literally had a week's prep before filming began, and I've done jobs where I prepped for 4 months. So it varies.
It varies. Cool. And your predecessor, I mean, when it came to working with Zach, Larry Fong was Zach's previous cinematographer, and he had quite a distinct style coming all the way back from basically 300 and Batman v Superman, and then when you took the reins over, was there anything of his that you kind of kept in there, or did you do your own thing? Like, how was that like?
Well, I don't think I took the reins over. I think Larry just gave them to me for a movie, and then I gave them back to him. Because I fully, Larry and Zach have been friends for over 20 years. They've been shooting together for more than 20 years. They have a massive history, and obviously Larry has done almost all of Zach's stuff, and they are an amazing team. And Larry, I know Larry, he's an amazing guy. He's a lovely guy, and he's an amazing cinematographer who I've always admired. So to just be able to go in for a job and replace him, so to say, was a great honor to me. And it was big shoes to fill. Larry is an incredible cinematographer. So it was scary, to me it was scary, and also challenging, which I loved. And I always wanted to keep Justice League in the Zack Snyder style, even though Zack wanted to be slightly more colorful than Man of Steel, than
Batman v
BVS, for
Superman.
example.
Yeah.
But the style, the Snyder style, we wanted to keep, and I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep the contrast and the darkness, and that was all that's all the elements of the Zack Snyder stuff that I love. That's and so I wanted to keep all of that. Hopefully, somehow I managed to put my own touch on it, and keeping it within Zack's and Larry's style.
Yeah. And you were recently involved in the additional photography for the movie. What was that like? I mean, pretty much the whole movie was shot before, but once the Snyder Cut movement gained approval, and the film was basically approved for release on HBO Max, you guys decided to go ahead and shoot a few more scenes. I read up somewhere that you guys shot for like 4 or 5 minutes. Like that's the amount of screen time that you pretty much added to the film. So what was that like?
I actually, because of COVID, because I'm in the UK right now, and I couldn't travel to LA, so they were shooting in LA. They were only shooting for a couple of days. I think roughly around 4 minutes of material. So I actually wasn't physically there.
Got you. Okay. So I want to kind of go back to Game of Thrones. You were part of one of the biggest battle sequences, if not the biggest battle sequence, I guess, Battle of the Bastards. What was it like staging such a monumental event, translating that from page to screen? How is that process like?
Well, it was a long process. It was a fun process to begin with. It became a very tedious process after a while, because we were prepping that for a long time. It was the biggest thing they'd done at that time. It was very expensive. It was very tricky to, we didn't have that much time. We had 16 days, I think, to shoot the episode from the moment they stand off on the battlefield to the end when Jon hits Ramsay. It was, and the script was, I think I seem to remember that the script for it was much bigger in the very beginning than what we ended up with, which was already big.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and we just couldn't film all of it because we didn't have the time for it. So it was, Miguel and I spent a lot of time going through the script and trying to narrow it down, trying to take out the things that were really important, trying to find a way of telling the story without it being boring. Because even though I love battle sequences, once you've watched the battle sequence for 2 minutes, you become bored if it's not about anything. So we were talking about, who do we make this about for the audience not to get bored? So we decided to make it about Jon's journey and Jon's battle. And so that's how we came up with all of these things following Jon. And so we spent a lot of time just sort of making it more streamlined and making it achievable, really. And that was it. And then we just set out to do it. And it was 17 or 16 really tough days of shooting in Ireland when it was very cold, very muddy. It was great. It was great. It really was a fun shoot, but it was also very, very tough, especially for the the stunts, the horses, the extras were incredible. The art department did an amazing job with the body pile and all of that sort of stuff. There was a lot of work that went into it, and it was tough,
And a show like Game of Thrones, it's very CGI. Like you have CGI and visual effects. Same goes to movies like Victor Frankenstein, Justice League. So working with visual effects, how does cinematography play a role? And like, what's your approach to shooting for VFX?
Well, it's exactly the same. I don't change anything in my approach. It's obviously it's mentally it's a different approach, and you have to have a bit of imagination. You have to have a great visual effects team to work with. You know, you prep slightly differently because you don't prep a location. You prep a green screen stage. It's different because, you know, Justice League was, you know, it's not that you're just on a green set. You know, you have a lot of real set, and then you have a green screen extension or something. So
Yeah.
there's a big difference there. So working with a real set just still gives you something real. I mean, it's something I've done for a long time now. I kind of fell into doing a lot of visual effects, and thankfully I really enjoy doing visual effects. And I love imagining what it's going to be like and what it's going to look like later. And I love doing interactive lighting and sort of figuring out this world. You know, the collaboration with the visual effects department is something that I really enjoy. So,
Got you. And before Justice League, had you shot on IMAX, IMAX film before, or was that like the first time?
The whole of Justice League was shot on 35mm, Super 35.
Really?
We didn't actually shoot IMAX.
Okay, but when it comes to the release, it's gonna have the 1.6621 ratio. It's not gonna be in the basically not 16 by 9 or 2.35.
No, because we shot the whole film, top to
Got
bottom.
you.
So we basically shot 4:3, basically.
Interesting.
Because we shot the whole 35mm film.
That is great. Okay. Wow. And it being like it's gonna be released in the same aspect ratio as well. Was it something that you and Zack decided together, or was it solely Zack's decision?
No, it was something that Zack wanted to do for a long, long time, I think. And this, I think he was like, you know, we always protected for 4:3. So because we shot the whole negative, so he always said he would love to do this, show this in 4:3. And so yeah, there we are.
It's a very interesting creative decision.
Well, I think it's, you know, it's different. Well, it's not, you know, that used to be the format that everything was shot on back in the day. So
back in the day, yeah.
You know, it just changed, and there's still films that are being shot that way. So it's not something too unusual, but it's probably unusual for a blockbuster of that size to do that. But it's going to be interesting. I think I've seen some of the stuff, and I think it really adds to the grandeur of it. You know, so.
Definitely. And you spoke about production design before. You had the man Patrick Tatopoulos on the Justice League set, designing pretty much everything in there. How was that like? I mean, seeing all those sets for the first time and then deciding how you were going to frame basically the composition. How did the production design play a role, like if it did at all? How did it influence the cinematography?
Well, it always does, and generally for me, I think, I mean, a good production design, the better the production design, the less you have to think about your framing or your camera angles, because if you work on a good set, you're like, wow, you know, I mean, Patrick is a genius, the way he does things. I loved working with Patrick. And, you know, just working on the sets every day, you know, you obviously see the sets prior because you see drawings and you see references and you see like mock-ups of things, but then, and you think, wow, that's going to be cool. And then you walk on and you'd be like, oh, fuck me, that's like incredible, you know? So that's happened a lot. And you know, yeah, he's so creative and so interesting how he does things. I loved working with him too.
And to our audience, you guys can ask questions if you have any. Please drop them in the comments below. We'll answer them periodically. And Fabian, about going back to television, a series like Sherlock. how do you basically approach the cinematography when it comes to I think I did ask this before about genre, but something like basically you have Sherlock Holmes, the whole deduction process. How do you break that down? Does it come from the shot list itself? And if so, like how involved are you in that in that particular task?
Well, I mean, it would always be a collaboration with the director, but and you would talk about things about how he or she would want to see things or shoot things, and I mean, that particular case with the way we did Sherlock, sort of analyzing things, that was because I was doing season 2, and Paul McGuigan, who I was shooting with, he also directed the pilot. So he actually came up with the idea on season 1. So he already knew that for that he wants to do it this way, and then we kind of just evolved from there and sort of hopefully made it, I mean, not necessarily better, but sort of our own. But a lot of the time, when you do something for the first time, it's communication and collaborating with the director and figuring out how to do things.
Gotcha. So we have a question over here. So have you worked on virtual sets like the volume or the brain bar, like how The Mandalorian is made, where the environment is CG responsive and real-time rendered? If so, how much does it affect your cinematography approach?
Thank you, Zion. I've done some tests on the volume. I haven't actually shot anything on the volume. My next project, we're going to shoot quite a lot of it on the volume. So we're starting to test it and we're starting to try things out. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I'm obviously seeing The Mandalorian. I think it works incredibly well. So I'm looking forward to shooting on it properly. I think it's very interesting and helpful because it gives you interactive light, so there's a light that comes from the screens which establishes a certain atmosphere already, which I think can be helpful. It's same as if you go into a location, shoot in a location, the first thing you do when you go to a new location in the interior, you go in and you switch all the lights off in there and you just see what the actual light does. And so that's something that if you're on a green screen stage, you don't have that. You have to make everything there, from zero. You build everything up. Whereas obviously there's an element of something when you're on a location or when you're on the volume, because the screens are already emitting light. So I think it's, I might change my mind after shooting it for 5 months, but I'm looking forward to it right now.
Was the part where John was getting crushed by his troops and the body pile CGI or mostly practical effects?
So when John was getting crushed by his troops, that was all for real. We were lying in the shit, in the mud, in the horse piss with Kit down there, and we had about 10 or so stunt guys who were sort of jumping over him, and we had extras surrounding him, so that was all done for real. There was no CGI. The body pile, we had a huge amount of the body pile was real. We had molds made, which we were dressing in, and then we put bigger molds on top to make it bigger and bigger to evolve it. Then we had real extras lying on top of obviously fake bodies. So most of the stuff that you see is actually for real in camera, but then when we were cut to the big wide shots, obviously we extended the body part on the sides. I think we must have had I think our real body pile was probably about 40 meters wide, so about 120 feet wide. That's huge. And then so everything you see that's wider, we extended in CG.
That's crazy. We have another question from outside of Facebook. what are you looking forward to the most when it comes to the Snyder Cut?
Nothing in particular. I'm just looking forward to seeing the whole thing. You know, I haven't seen the whole movie yet. I haven't seen the movie, obviously, that Zack always wanted to make in 2017. I know all the things that we shot. I know all the scenes that we shot that we didn't see in the 2017 version. So I'm just looking forward to seeing the whole film.
And personal question: you've been around the world working with different crews, basically with different locations. What are the biggest challenges that are come with shifting locations, basically like going from country to country? I know you guys shot in you said Ireland and Iceland as well. Game of Thrones is pretty much shot there too. So what was that like? I mean, I know like the weather conditions can specifically be tough, but what else? Anything that the audience doesn't really catch on?
Well, I mean, there's different challenges in every country. I mean, generally, I think it's amazing to be able to travel for your work. So I love seeing different places. I love working with different people. I love, yes, you shoot in Iceland, it can be too cold sometimes. You shoot in Sri Lanka, it can be too hot sometimes. But it is what it is. I mean, I think that's great. So I love all of that. The hardest thing is not any film related stuff. The hardest thing is you sometimes have to be away from your family for a long time. For example, you don't see your kids every night. You don't see your wife all the time. So you have to be away a lot, and that makes it very difficult sometimes. But it's an absolute pleasure, and it's an absolute joy to be able to shoot in different parts of the world. And I've seen so many places that I probably would have never seen otherwise. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, sure. So Dylan here has seen storyboards and some BTS pics of the Wayne Aerospace hangar scene, where you guys had this really awesome multiple camera setup for the scene where the league is talking about Superman's resurrection. Can you give us some insight into how that setup worked and how it helped the scene? Also, was it your idea or Zack's?
And that was something that it kind of just evolved into something crazy after just talking about it for a few weeks. And it's a big scene with all the characters. So you've got 6 or 7 main characters. We were talking about a circular track, and then we talked about, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could just shoot the whole thing in like literally one take, and seamlessly cutting from one camera to the other, from a wider to a tighter lens, and back and forth, and because if you shoot it with one camera, then there's always going to be something different, and the timing will never be the same. Whereas if you put 2 cameras on the same dolly, shooting through the same exact lens, basically, or on the same exact plane, but on 2 different sizes, you get a complete, exact matching continuity on whatever the camera's doing, whatever the actor's doing. And so we just came up with this crazy rig, which was circular track with 2 dollies, or 4 dollies all together, doing the scene. And I haven't seen the scene yet, and I can't wait to see it. But I spoke to Zack a couple of weeks ago, and he was very happy with it. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I'm not entirely sure if Fabian's allowed to divulge this
I can't
information.
answer that.
He's not. Unfortunately, I think we'll have to wait until Warner Brothers decides to release something. And hi, Fabian, what is your take on shooting on film versus digital in general? The age-old question.
Well, I personally, I don't, I was very lucky that when I started filming, I was shooting everything on film. So about for six, I was working with film and then shooting on film for at least 10 years, which was, great and a great experience. And, I love shooting film. And then in 2010, 2011, everything changed digital, and we went through this terrible process of having like terrible video cameras with Pro 35 adapters and all these sort of things to try and make it look more filmy. And it took about three years or so before the Alexa came out, and then that changed everything. And the Alexa, I think, is a great camera, and I think there's amazing cameras out there now shooting digitally that most people will not be able to tell a difference whether it was shot on film or digital. To me personally, for me, I shot Justice League on film, and I shot a couple of commercials since I'm on film. I always love shooting film. I also enjoy shooting digital very much. It's something that, I find it hard to. I'm not for or against anything. I see the benefits and the downfalls of both formats. I always think it's funny that we were shooting film for more than 100 years, and they developed film to the very best it can be. By 2010, you had the best film cameras. They were perfectly silent, completely steady. You could go up to, hundreds and hundreds of frames per second, and it would be a perfect image. They had developed the film stock, the Kodak Vision 3, was a perfect film stock, and exactly at the time when everything is perfect, and they spent 100 years developing it, they thought, oh, let's fuck it all, and let's start something new that was terrible. So I always find it such a paradox. It's just ridiculous, but it is what it is. And then now we have great cameras like the Alexas, the Venices, and things like that. And I think, personally for me, as long as it looks good, I shoot on anything. I just hope that in the future, the cinematographers or the creative teams have more control over whether they can shoot on film or on digital. I think that would be the biggest step that we can have. That it's not the producers, not the production that decides what you have to shoot on. It would be great if we can decide what we shoot on. And the other thing I want to say is that with digital, for example, I love what it's given me in terms of teamwork, for example, with the DIT. I love working with my DIT. It's a really interesting, creative friendship and relationship that we have. There's one guy that I work with mainly, and he's amazing. He's an incredible DIT, and he's become a great friend, and he's a real, I think he makes my work better, working with him. So I enjoy that aspect of shooting digital. At the same time, I love shooting film because I think there's a magic to it. I love the sound of it when you're having a film camera handheld. I love the flexibility of just picking up a film camera that's loaded, and I can just run off on my own and shoot something. When you shoot digital, you have like all of this stuff behind you in the video village and all the cables, and you can't just do that. So there's good and bad for everything.
Lovely. Our next question is more story related. So when filming a scene with Batman, who's supposed to be dark and broody, and Superman, who is supposed to be the light and messiah, who supersedes when they are both in frame. Is it dependent on the scene, or does one character trump the other?
No, I don't think any character trumps the other. I think it's very individual, and it very much depends on the scene that you're filming. Depends on the scene, depends on the mood of the scene, depends on the location. Depends on the point at which the character is within the story. So that's hard to answer.
Hi Fabian, what do you think about how much important better lighting is to get a better look in color grading process? Basically, it's about how lighting influences color grading in the post-production process?
Well, for me, the color grading process is a very important process, and I think it's the final piece of the puzzle of shooting a film or shooting a project. It's part of the cinematography, it's part of the lighting, and it's part of the creating the look for the film. So it's a huge part of it. All the things that you do when you're shooting, it's all leading up to doing the color grade, where you putting it all together and making it all one. So it's a huge part.
Just to expand on that a little bit further, how involved do you get in particularly in the post-production stage? Are you ever in the colorist's room, or do you have any say over there? I mean, I usually the director of photography does take part in certain discussions, but what's your involvement like during the post-production stage?
Well, I mean, you always try and be there. You always, if you can't be there physically, you would talk to the colorist. I mean, I spend a lot of time if I can't be there physically, which happens sometimes because, by the time the color happens, you might be on a different movie, because the color sometimes happens, 8 months, 9 months after you finish shooting. So that's a long time. So by that time I could be busy somewhere else. If I can, I would always attend it. I would always go there personally. But if you can't, then you would you'd have a chat with the colorist, and you would, normally they would send me stills, and then I would grade the stills at home on Photoshop. I would send them back. We would talk about it. I would make notes of, what the stuff that I wanted.
Gotcha. So, there's another question, which is basically about, what do you do if you have a big challenge on your working day, and what if you make a mistake?
Well, I make mistakes every day. I make mistakes every day. Mistakes are human. It's a human thing to make mistakes. I used to get very upset about the mistakes I made until I realized that, what, it's just human, and it's just what happens. And there's a lot of stuff I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I'm learning. I'm learning stuff every single day, and I'm very aware of that. And I'm very much enjoying that too. And I always think that if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. So I've learned to embrace all my mistakes and learn from them. And so it doesn't upset me as much anymore, but I certainly learn from it. And next time I know that I won't do that mistake again. And then I realize I didn't do that mistake again, but I did another mistake at the same time. So that's just life, isn't it?
How often do you look back at your own work and go like, I should have done that differently? Is it like pretty much all the time, like when you look back on your past work, or is there anything
well, I
that
don't really look back much. I mean, I've just been looking back at some stuff because I'm trying to cut a new show reel.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I used to look back at stuff, and I used to try and analyze it and blah blah blah, and it just basically caused me sleepless nights. Because you realize how many mistakes you made. But like I said, it's something that I've moved on from. I'm not doing that anymore because I can only. I'll try and improve on what I do in the future by having learned from what I've done wrong in the past. There's no point in going over all those things again. So
exactly. Hi Fabian, what is your favorite part? The favorite part. What's your most favorite part you shot in the Snyder Cut? Are you allowed to divulge this?
I mean, look. I mean, I've said this before. Every day was amazing on that film to come on. I've never done a big film like this before. So every day you'd come on the set and you'd be, this is amazing. Today we're shooting, Aquaman walking down the pier, and jumping in the water. That was a great set. every day I was walking on set thinking this is just great. I mean, probably one of my favorite days would definitely be the day with the bat light, the bat signal coming on, and Gordon standing on the rooftop, and Batman up on the gargoyle, and it was raining, and the lightning flash and stuff. But that's only because Batman was always my favorite character when I was a kid. So I always loved the Batman character, and to sort of stand there and shoot Batman was pretty cool. So that personally, that was one of my favorite days. But every day was something different on that film. Every day was something cool on that film. So
gotcha.
It's hard to say.
Dylan's got another question. That's totally fine, Dylan. So you said that both of you discussed what would happen after the first movie. I'm assuming he's referring to Justice League. So if a sequel ends up getting greenlit, would you return as the cinematographer for it?
If you can tell him, please take Fabian. Yes, that'd be great. But it's not up to me. It's not my decision. I would love to. Yeah, I had a great time. I would love to obviously work with Zack again. I would love to do something else for DC. I had the best time of my life. So yes, I would totally do that. But it's not up to me. It's up to the director. It's up to the studio. It's up to many other people before I get involved. And I also, like I said earlier, I'm very grateful for the opportunity of having worked with Zack. And if I can do that again at some point, that would be great. But I also realize that Larry is his longtime friend and cinematographer, and so it's just what it is.
As a cinematographer, whose work has inspired you the most?
I never like to answer that question because there's so many.
Yeah.
There's too many. There's too many people. There's too many films. There's too many people. There's too many directors. There's so many good films. There's so many good films that look bad. There's so many bad films that look amazing. There's so much of everything. I get inspiration from everything. I get inspiration from walking around the park. I get inspiration from looking at paintings, films, movies, TV shows, looking at pictures, stills, looking at you get inspiration from everything. It's not just certain things. So there's a lot of stuff that sort of inspires you. But yeah, I don't like to pinpoint a few names because it doesn't make the whole thing justice.
Yeah, it is a very tricky question. Plus, what would your advice be to any upcoming budding cinematographer? If you could basically go back in time and tell your younger version, what advice would you give?
I mean, obviously I can only speak from my own experience. I think, first of all, just always be honest to yourself and be true to yourself. Don't try and bullshit people because bullshit always comes to the surface sooner or later. And you just have to be super committed. You have to work really, really hard. It's one of those industries where I believe that the more you give, the more you get. You make your own luck. I worked my ass off for years and years and years and years, and years and years and years and years and years. And I was doing things for free all the time, trying to learn more, trying to meet more people. It's all about meeting people. It's all about clicking with people, meeting the right people at the right time. And then it's all of those things. And then on top of all those things that you can influence yourself, these are all things that you have to do yourself. And it can be very tough. It can be really hard. You're going to miss all your friends' birthdays. You're not going to go out getting drunk when your friends are all getting drunk because you're going to have to get up at 5 a.m. You have to be really disciplined. I missed all of those things. I missed all the weddings, all the birthdays, all the, because I always tried to work, and I always wanted to give it my all. And on top of all of those things that you can influence yourself, you also have a lot of things that you can't influence. And these are things like meeting the right people at the right time, doing the right project at the right time. All of those things it's just luck, and if I go back in my career, I can pinpoint exactly those moments where I just met the right people at the right time that helped me with something. And obviously my drive and my hard work all played into that, but it has to be a combination, I think, So I'm very grateful for how it's all turned out. I never thought about what I'm going to do. I never thought about how I'm going to do it. I never thought about what will I do in 10 years time, 5 years time, whatever. So I can only look back on it now and say I'm very grateful for how it's all turned out. But
that's some brilliant insight right there. So our next question is, the director is not happy with your ideas. How do you handle the situation? Director, DOP relationship clashes. How does that work out?
Well, this is, you have, one of this is a collaborative job. This is a collaborative, for me at least it is. I love collaborating with people. Four eyes see more than two eyes. To me, that's the key of making something. Sorry, of making something. Is the key to that is collaboration. So and yes, sometimes it's hard to sort of when someone doesn't like your idea, it can be hard sometimes and frustrating. But ultimately, I'm the cinematographer, and I'm there to help the director make their film. And if he or she or they have a clear idea of what they want, whether it's right or wrong or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's their film, and so I'm there to support that. So, most of the times you talk about it, and you sometimes fight about it, and you have an argument, and you come up with something that's right for it. And sometimes your idea doesn't get chosen, and that's totally fine. I'm not. I'm not. It is what it is. It's fine. So.
Yeah. Sometimes your ideas work out. Sometimes you
realize that your idea actually was really bad. Sometimes you have an idea and you think this is a great idea, and then you don't do that, and you do something completely different, and you think, God, I'm so glad we've done that, because my idea actually was really bad.
Because sometimes the director tends to see the bigger picture and how it should work within that framework, I guess. Yeah. So there's my DOP asking a question here. So what are the main points deciding what type of lens is used in a scene?
I guess they're all different for every EP. For me, I actually don't know. I like using different lenses. I like mixing things up. I like using different stuff. And it depends on the film that you're doing. It depends on the project, so it just involves some testing, and you have certain ideas. Okay, I want something that's sharper, I want something that's cleaner, I don't want an anamorphic lens that bends everything. I want an anamorphic lens that has everything, where everything looks straight. It just depends on it's generally, I would have thoughts about that as soon as I read the script. I would think, okay, this sounds like go into that direction, or it goes into this direction, and then you talk to the director, and then you come up with ideas, and then you test it, and then you choose one that's hopefully the right thing. But
Would you ever venture out into directing?
Hmm?
Would you ever venture out into directing? Like, would you want to direct a film someday?
Oh, directing. I mean,
Yeah.
I directed a film at film school, and it was pretty terrible. And I think maybe I've been thinking about directing a short film. I've been trying to write the script for an idea that I have, but I find writing very difficult. I just don't think I'm clever enough to be a director. Directors have a really incredibly tough job. It's a very, 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 very tough job. And I love photography. I love cinematography. There's a lot more I've got to learn, doing what I'm doing, and I'm looking forward to all of that. So, you know, I don't know.
What
Right
would
now, I
you
just want to
say?
shoot.
Sorry, go on.
No, right now I just want to shoot stuff.
Gotcha. So, what would you say has been the most beneficial in terms of improving yourself, improve your skill as a cinematographer? Like, what experience? I mean, I know every single movie that you work on tends to lend you, various kinds of experience. But has there been anything, apart from filmmaking that has contributed to your development as a cinematographer?
Yeah, I think talking with students and talking with young filmmakers, because it's something I've been doing for a long time. I'm doing that. I've been doing that with on many different levels. I'm a mentor with BAFTA and with the ASC, and I've been doing things
Mhm.
myself a lot with young people and up and coming filmmakers. And I think just talking to all of
Gotcha.
those people, I think is something that's helped me myself.
That's interesting. Like, so you get a fresh take, a fresh look on how people, like different people, like basically youngsters see the world, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, just to, before we wind up, uh, one final question. When it comes to, if you had your way releasing Justice League in theaters, uh, what time period would you have liked it to have come out, back in 2017 or like way later? Would you? I think what I'm trying to ask you is, uh, do you think that the Snyder Cut movement kind of gave, like, I mean, it definitely did give more hype to the film as a whole, but would you have rather had the movie in theaters or have it go straight to streaming?
Oh, I see what you mean.
I know it's a tough
Well,
one.
no, I mean it's not a tough question because it basically means that you know, um, of course, I would have preferred that Zack would have finished his movie in 2017 or
Mhm.
16, and it would have come out in 2017 because it would have meant that his family wouldn't have had to go through such a horrible, tragic thing.
Yeah,
Um, I wish that was something that had never happened. So, of course, I wish that had been the case, but unfortunately, that's not the way it went. And I think we just have to be glad that we will at least see the film the way that Zach had always wanted us to see it.
got you. Awesome. Fabian, thank you so much for joining. Guys, thank you so much for your questions. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but who knows, perhaps someday in the future, Fabian might be coming back on board the show again and maybe visiting Sri Lanka in the near future. Who knows?
Let's
Fabian,
do it.
thank
That
you.
was a lot of fun. We'll see you again. Yeah, maybe we'll
Likewise.
talk after we've all seen the Snyder Cut.
Likewise, yeah. So looking forward to that. So looking
Yeah,
forward to that.
me too.
And all the best on whatever it is that you're working next. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, guys. Take
See you.
care. Stay safe.